It was another huge shock for the member states because the refugees are of a number which hasn't been seen since the last war, the Second World War. The Russian war in Ukraine made many people, mostly women, children, elderly people, leave the country and look for shelter and for some security in Europe. This was a huge wave. These were tens of millions of people that went out of Ukraine. The first pressure was on the neighboring countries, the border countries, but with the time, Ukrainians are spreading across the member states. What we can see is a very positive reaction of the member states, despite the size, the magnitude of this refugee process. We have seen not only government policies, but we have seen a public reaction to this war, which was very visible. We have seen people opening their homes, collecting food, providing shelters, volunteering to help refugees. So this is something that I think we need to appreciate. Of course, the European Union helped the member states. The governments also had their programs. But what I really saw as something which we haven't seen so much, that was the very strong public support for the welcoming the refugees. Then, since this is a war which didn't end very quickly as some imagined, then the problem with the protracted war in Ukraine and the security problems that still remain in the country make member states look for longer-term solutions. And of course, first coming in mind, this is the labor market and the possibility for the refugees to go to the labor market. This happens, but not hugely, because many of these refugees are women, children, elderly people that would not exactly fit the labor market, although they are looking for sources of income. But there is a huge strain on the public services. And especially housing, healthcare, schooling, providing conditions for these children that are on the European soil. This requires a huge effort, and I have seen the member states really being very active and providing this. This is not certainly the ideal situation, but in this emergency situation, I think that the reaction was really exemplary. Inflation was something which had its roots in the previous crisis and the recovery from the previous crisis, from COVID. Because in EU, the member states spent lots of money to preserve the jobs, to preserve the working places, to help the most vulnerable people. This increased public expenditures inevitably led to higher inflation. So we already had it before the war started. When the war started, especially due to the cost of energy resources and food supplies, the prices went sky high. And then all the other prices also followed. And then the drivers are not anymore food and energy, but the general conditions. What we have seen in Europe, this was the first reaction which came mostly at national level, addressing all the groups in the societies, which was maybe good as a first reaction, as an immediate reaction, trying to really calm down prices. We have seen different types of measures, adding to the income or putting some caps on the prices of energy, or unfortunately not too many measures stimulating the users of green energies to switch their energy consumption. But with the time we see a shift now. The longer the war continues, the more focused the measures become. And they tend to target the most vulnerable groups. This is where the big risk is, because these groups were already impacted by the previous crisis. I mean, every crisis, we shouldn't look at the average figures. I mean, every crisis leaves another group in our societies behind. More vulnerable, with less possibilities to quickly return to normal life, and this is where the big risks in the society are. So now we see an effort to channel the public resources towards these people. Unfortunately, this war is going and is having a price that all of us we pay. and we have to go through this again in solidarity. I don't see another option, actually. The long-term issues are really very important. We need to look beyond what is around us, expecting the unexpected, because this is how we live in the last 10 or 15 years. There all the time crisis. It was the economic crisis back in 2008, then it was COVID, now there is the war in Ukraine. Who knows what's going to happen in the next years? So lesson number one, we need to be very agile, and it has to do with the work of Eurofound, but also with the way we organize our work, but with the topics that we also follow. How this agility could address the pertaining issues in the society. Then looking at long-term in the living conditions and work, we should not lose sight on the major priorities and big transformation and changes. This is the digital transformation, the green transformation, the aging of the European societies. These are challenges, these are processes that are happening. I mean, they are tectonic processes, very, very powerful ones. And dealing with the crisis around us, we have to keep an eye and we have to analyze what are the processes there. So more or less, this is the framework of how Eurofound is looking at the changes, digital, green, demographic changes, and the ability and the agility to address all the developments that appear without expecting them.